In the sacred temple of the eternal sun, during the most important ceremony of the year, when hundreds of marked nobles stood in perfect formation, channeling divine power that would bless the entire kingdom, a young prince collapsed. His newly received solar lion mark burned out of control, overwhelming him, killing him from within. Ceremony could injure everyone through catastrophic feedback. The marked ones watched helplessly as Prince Daemon fell, his mark blazing so hot the air around him shimmered and warped. Then a cleaning woman ran forward. Naya, unmarked and invisible, someone who had no business being anywhere near the sacred ceremony, pushed through the circle of frozen nobles and pressed her bare hand against the prince's blazing mark. The temple went dead silent. Every single mark in the building dimmed simultaneously. Hundreds of people stopped breathing at once, because the impossible was happening. His out-of-control mark was stabilizing under her touch. The divine power that had been consuming him was calming and evening out, responding to contact from someone who possessed no mark at all. And then the solar lion itself manifested above them, declaring words that would change two lives and the kingdom forever. She is Conduit, rarest of all marked ones, who can touch any mark safely and help channel divine power. She has always been mine, but her gift required this crisis to manifest. Already you've checked if you're subscribed to the channel. And tell me, from which city are you listening to this story? The kingdom of Radiant Throne had been ruled by the Solar Dynasty for 8 centuries, a line of sun kings whose marks blazed bright enough to drive back darkness itself, and whose authority was considered divine mandate made visible through supernatural power granted directly by the solar lion. The kingdom prospered under their leadership, developing sophisticated culture and powerful military forces, eastern mountains to the western sea. At the heart of the kingdom's spiritual and political life stood the sacred temple of the eternal sun, who advised the throne and shaped the kingdom's direction through their counsel and divine connections. The temple was magnificent, its central dome reaching so high that clouds sometimes formed inside during certain weather conditions. Maintaining this vast complex required dedicated staff of priests and servants, most of them unmarked, who cleaned and prepared spaces, like ensuring floors were swept or braziers were properly filled or ceremonial robes were cleaned and ready for use. Among these servants was Naya, 26 years old. Conflicts over increasingly scarce water resources. She was daughter of farmers who had worked the same land for generations until the rains stopped coming and the wells ran dry, forcing them to abandon everything and flee to the capital, seeking survival and opportunity. Her parents had died within months of reaching the city, succumbing to illnesses that their weakened bodies could not fight off. She found work in the temple through sheer persistence. She proved herself capable and trustworthy, gradually earning more responsibilities and better assignments, their work acknowledged only through its absence when something was left undone or improperly managed. Over 8 years, Naya had become deeply familiar with the temple's layout and purposes. She knew where the ceremony of Convergence would take place, had prepared the Great Hall dozens of times for previous ceremonies. The Convergence was the kingdom's most important annual ceremony, occurring at summer solstice when solar power peaked and divine connections were at their strongest. Marked ones from throughout the kingdom gathered in the temple's great hall, arranged in precise geometric patterns according to their totems and power levels, and they channeled their marks in synchronized harmony that created feedback loop of divine energy. This concentrated power, properly directed and focused, created blessing that protected and sustained the entire kingdom for another year, ensuring good harvests and successful campaigns and general prosperity. The ceremony required hours of preparation and lasted several hours itself, demanding absolute concentration and coordination from all participants, potentially leaving the kingdom vulnerable to misfortune and catastrophe for the entire following year, risking divine disfavor and practical disaster simultaneously. The convergence of the burning year, as it would later be called, was particularly significant because Prince Daemon, the Sun King's youngest son, would be participating for the first time. At age 16, during a hunt where he had shown exceptional courage, defending his companions from a territorial predator that should have killed them all. The mark was powerful, blazing bright from the moment it appeared, but it was also new and not yet fully mastered or integrated into Daemon's understanding of himself and his capabilities. Whether 3 months was sufficient time to develop the control and stamina required for hours-long ceremony that would place enormous demands on all participants. Conservative priests argued for caution, suggesting Daemon wait another year to gain experience and mastery before attempting something as challenging as Convergence. But the prince himself had insisted on participating, viewing it as necessary test of his readiness and commitment to his duties, and the Sun King had supported his son's desire to prove himself capable and dedicated. So despite concerns and reservations, permission was granted, and arrangements were made to position Daemon in the formation where more experienced, marked ones could monitor him and intervene if necessary, though what intervention meant when everyone was locked in synchronized channeling was unclear and poorly defined because such situations rarely arose during properly executed ceremonies. Naya had prepared the great hall as always, working through the night before the ceremony to ensure every detail was perfect. She polished the golden pillars until they reflected light like mirrors, arranged hundreds of cushions in the precise geometric pattern that the ceremony required, checked and rechecked every element against detailed checklists that specified exactly how everything should be arranged. Then, as dawn approached and marked ones began arriving for pre-ceremony preparations, she gathered her cleaning supplies and left through the servants' entrance as protocol required. But several hours later, as the ceremony was well underway and she was trying to sleep in her small room, she realized she had forgotten some of her cleaning supplies in the preparation room adjacent to the great hall. The supplies were not particularly valuable or important, but they were her responsibility, and losing them would mean explaining to her supervisor what had happened and possibly facing punishment for carelessness. So she made the decision to retrieve them quickly while the ceremony was ongoing, assuming she could enter through the servants' entrance, grab her supplies from the preparation room. She moved quietly through the outer corridors, keeping to the shadows and service passages that allowed temple staff to move through the complex. As she passed near the doorway connecting the preparation room to the great hall, she heard something that made her freeze in place. She knew she should not look, that witnessing sacred ceremonies was forbidden for unmarked servants, that she should simply grab her supplies and leave immediately before anyone noticed her presence. Prince Daemon was collapsing to his knees in the center ring of the formation. His face was contorted in agony, sweat pouring down his skin, his hands clutching at his chest where the mark burned brightest, as if he could somehow pull the divine power out of himself and stop the burning that was consuming him from within. The marked ones around him maintained their positions in the geometric formation, bodies rigid with concentration, marks glowing as they channeled power in synchronized patterns. But their eyes showed awareness of the crisis unfolding, their faces revealing helpless horror as they watched the young prince dying while being unable to break, simultaneously maintaining the overall ceremony's integrity and preventing complete collapse of the synchronized channeling that had been building for hours. "Focus on your breathing," the priest commanded, his voice steady despite obvious stress and concern. "Visualize the power as river flowing through you, rather than fire consuming you. You can control this, Prince Daemon." But Daemon was clearly beyond hearing or responding to verbal instruction, overwhelmed by divine power that his inexperienced connection could not handle or channel safely, catastrophic levels that would kill him within minutes if nothing changed. Naya understood in that moment, with absolute clarity born from watching someone die, while others stood frozen by protocol and sacred obligation, that no one was going to help the prince. They would maintain their formation, preserve the ceremony's integrity, and let him burn to death, because disrupting convergence was considered more catastrophic than one person's death, even when that person was member of the royal family. She understood this, and she also understood with equal clarity that she could not simply watch it happen. She did not think about consequences or calculate risks to herself or consider whether intervention was permitted or wise. She simply acted, moving before conscious decision was made, through the outer ring of marked warriors who could not physically stop her without. She reached the center circle where Prince Daemon knelt burning alive, dropped to her knees beside him, and pressed her bare hand firmly against his solar landmark, the one blazing on his chest that was so hot the air around it shimmered and warped. Happened simultaneously in rapid succession. The prince's out-of-control mark stopped escalating. Naya felt enormous surge of power flow into her hand and up her arm. Not painful exactly, but overwhelming and intense, like touching lightning that somehow chose not to destroy her, like being filled with sunlight that was too bright to look at, but which did not burn or blind her despite its impossible intensity. The entire temple went completely and utterly silent, every voice stopping mid-word, every breath held, every mark in the entire building dimming simultaneously, as if divine power itself was pausing to witness what was occurring. And Prince Daemon gasped, his eyes focusing on Naya's face for the first time since his crisis began, relief and confusion mixing in his expression as the unbearable burning sensation eased, and he could think clearly again rather than being consumed entirely by overwhelming agony and terror of dying. "What are you doing?" He managed to whisper, his voice rough and strained from screaming that Naya had not heard because she had not been watching from the beginning of his crisis. "How are you making it stop?" "I do not know," Naya answered with complete honesty, even though she could feel hundreds of eyes staring at her in shock and disbelief and probably anger at her violation of the most sacred ceremony in the kingdom's calendar. "But you were dying and no one was helping you because they could not break their formation without disrupting everything. So I helped you because I could not watch you die when I might be able to do something to prevent it. I am sorry if I have done something wrong or forbidden. I am sorry if I have ruined your ceremony or offended divine forces, but I am not sorry for trying to save your life." The high priest's voice cut through the shocked silence like blade through silk, sharp and hard with outrage and confusion, and barely controlled panic about what was happening. "Remove yourself from the sacred circle immediately. You are unmarked commoner violating the holiest ceremony we conduct. Your unauthorized touch could poison the prince's divine connection, could corrupt his mark, could disrupt the synchronized channeling we have spent hours establishing. Leave now before you cause catastrophe worse than what we already face." But even as he spoke, even as temple guards began moving forward to physically drag Naya away from the prince, something remarkable and unprecedented began to happen. Golden light started emanating not from Prince Daemon's solar lion mark, but from Naya's hand where it touched him. Brilliant warm glow that spread up her arm and across her shoulders and down her torso in flowing patterns that resembled traditional mark designs but were somehow different, more like reflection or echo of divine power rather than direct permanent connection. The light was beautiful and strange, pulsing gently in rhythm with her heartbeat. If the mark could not quite decide whether to manifest permanently or remain, invisible as it had been her entire life until this crisis moment. Unable to maintain standing position in the face of divine attention that pressed down on them with weight of eternity and absolute authority. The solar lion not as mere symbol on human skin but as actual divine entity, its attention fixed on Naya with regard that was assessing and measuring but not unkind. And when it spoke, its voice resonated not in physical ears, but directly in minds and souls. "This one is Conduit," the solar lion declared, its tone carrying absolute authority that made argument or questioning impossible, compelling belief through sheer force of divine certainty. "Rarest form of marked one, occurring perhaps once in 5 generations across all territories. Someone who can touch any divine mark safely, regardless of which totem granted it or how powerful the bearer is. She serves as bridge between mortal flesh and divine power when such bridges are desperately needed, as they were needed in this moment to prevent the prince's death, and the catastrophic has always carried my blessing, even though it remained invisible to everyone, including herself, until this crisis demanded its full manifestation and revelation. She saved your prince's life just now by acting without hesitation when everyone else was frozen by protocol and sacred obligation. You will honor her appropriately, respect her gift." The divine manifestation faded as suddenly as it had appeared, presence withdrawing and leaving behind stunned silence that was somehow louder than any sound could have been. Everyone trying to process what they had just witnessed and heard. Naya remained kneeling beside Prince Daemon, her hand still pressed to his now stable mark that glowed with normal, sustainable intensity rather than the out-of-control burning that had been killing him moments earlier. Her entire body was still emanating that faint golden light that pulsed gently in patterns that suggested mark without quite forming one, and she looked as shocked and confused as everyone else felt. Prince Daemon stared at her with expression that mixed gratitude and awe and recognition that something profound had occurred between them that transcended the immediate physical crisis of his near-death experience. "You saved my life," he said quietly, speaking directly to her even though hundreds of people were listening to every word. "You violated sacred protocols and risked yourself to help someone you do not even know. Someone who has probably walked past you hundreds of times without seeing you or acknowledging your existence, because you are unmarked servant and why did you do it? Why did you risk everything for me? Because you needed help and no one else was providing it, Naya answered simply, her characteristic honesty cutting through the drama and significance everyone else was attaching to the moment. I could do regardless of protocols or consequences to myself. I did not know I possessed any gift or ability that would allow me to help you. I just knew I had to try because trying was better than doing nothing, while you burned to death in front of everyone. The high priest approached them slowly and carefully. You are Conduit, he said, speaking the word with weight of centuries of scholarly knowledge and rare historical references, understanding flooding his expression as pieces fell into place. This explains what just occurred, why your touch stabilized rather than disrupted his mark, why divine power flows through you without burning you or requiring permanent visible mark. The ancient temple records mention conduits in passing, describing them as rarest form of marked one, so uncommon that most marked individuals never encounter one in entire lifetimes. The texts say conduits often remain completely unaware of their nature until moment of crisis triggers full manifestation of their gift, that they appear entirely unmarked because their divine connection operates differently than standard totem bonds. You have worked here in this temple for how many years, cleaning and maintaining spaces, walking among us completely invisible and unrecognized while carrying gifts so rare and valuable that some marked ones. I apologize for my harsh words and commands to remove you. I was acting from protocol and concern for ceremony's integrity without understanding what was actually happening. You were following higher calling, even as I tried to stop you, meaningful than any ceremonial observance could ever be. Please forgive my ignorance and recognize that from this moment forward, you are honored guest and valued member of our temple community rather than invisible servant, who were all staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to awe to lingering skepticism about what had just occurred. I am just cleaning servant, she said, though even as she spoke the words she understood, they were no longer true or accurate description of what she was. I clean floors and prepare ceremonial spaces and maintain the temple so that important people can focus on important things without being distracted by mundane details. I do not know how to be anything else, how to be whatever you are saying I am now. The high priest shook his head firmly and definitively, his certainty absolute despite the unprecedented nature of the situation. You possess gift so rare and valuable that kingdoms would go to war to claim you if they knew you existed. You cannot return to cleaning floors and maintaining spaces as if nothing has changed. You must be trained in your gift's full potential and proper use, educated in the history and significance of conduits, given the resources and support necessary to master abilities you did not even know you possessed until they manifested to save the prince's life. You must take your rightful place among those who serve divine purposes directly and immediately rather than indirectly through maintenance work. Your life has changed completely, whether you are ready for that change or not, and we will help you navigate this transformation because the kingdom needs you and because it is right thing to do for someone who demonstrated such courage and compassion without any thought for personal benefit or advancement. The following weeks were profoundly disorienting and overwhelming for Nia as her entire She was moved from cramped servants' quarters she had occupied for 8 years to comfortable rooms in the temple's residential wing that was reserved exclusively for marked ones and honored guests, and practical applications of her newly manifested gift. She learned that conduits were mentioned in ancient texts going back to the kingdom's very founding centuries ago, that they appeared unpredictably across generations with no clear pattern or warning, that their ability to safely touch and help channel any divine mark, regardless of who struggled with control, and for assisting in complex rituals where multiple totems needed to work together harmoniously without interference or conflict. She learned that her gift had almost certainly been present but dormant her entire life, but rather temporary expressions of divine power flowing through her as she helped others. And she learned, to her profound surprise and discomfort, that Prince Daemon had insisted on being directly involved in her training process, that he wanted to understand the connection they had formed when she saved his life. They spent hours together over the following months, Daemon practicing his mark control and learning to channel. They worked with temple priests who specialized in mark training, with scholars who had studied historical accounts of previous conduits, with experienced marked ones who could help them understand the nuances of divine power and how it flowed through mortal bodies. But beyond the structured training and formal education, Daemon and Naya also simply talked, discovering they had surprisingly compatible minds and personalities despite. Daemon was intelligent and thoughtful beneath the royal privilege and expectations, genuinely curious about how ordinary people lived and thought, willing to question assumptions he had been taught since childhood about marks conferring superiority and unmarked. Naya was insightful and articulate despite her lack of formal education, her years of observation from invisible position having given her perspectives on temple life and marked culture that were valuable, precisely because they came from outside the system looking in rather than from inside looking around. They made each other laugh, challenged each other's thinking, found genuine enjoyment in each other's company that had nothing to do with marks or status or the dramatic circumstances that had brought them together. 3 months after the Convergence incident, after Naya had begun to adjust somewhat to her new role and Daemon suddenly stopped mid-exercise and turned to face her directly with expression that was serious and uncertain and visibly nervous. "I need to tell you something," he said, his usual confidence wavering as he struggled to find right words for what he wanted to express. "It is appropriate given the power difference between us and the complicated circumstances that brought us together. But I cannot continue without being honest with you about how I feel and what I want, because dishonesty or silence seems worse than the risk of making things awkward or uncomfortable between us." He took a deep breath, gathering courage, then spoke words that changed everything between them. "I love you, Naya. I have fallen in love with you over these past 3 months. I love your strength and your courage, the way you acted without any hesitation when I needed help, even though helping meant violating the most sacred ceremony we conduct and risking yourself for someone you did not even know. I love your intelligence and your observations about marked culture and power dynamics. The way you see things I completely miss because I have been inside the system my entire life while you observed it from outside. I love your honesty and directness, the way you speak truth without worrying about whether it is what I want to hear. I love who I am when I am with you, the way you make me want to be a better person and more thoughtful prince rather than just more powerful marked one. I know this creates enormous complications and problems we would have to navigate. You have only been recognized as Conduit for 3 months, are still adjusting to your completely transformed life and new status and role. I am Prince of the royal family, expected to marry strategically, to strengthen political alliances, and produce marked heirs to continue the solar dynasty. Our relationship would face intense opposition and endless questions about whether, but I needed you to know how I feel, needed to be honest about this, even if nothing can come of it. Even if you do not feel the same way, or if pursuing anything between us would be unwise or impossible. Naya stared at him for a long moment, completely surprised by this declaration despite the growing closeness between them that perhaps should have warned her something like this was developing. 3 months ago, I was invisible cleaning servant, she said slowly, processing what he had just revealed and what it might mean. Someone you had walked past hundreds or thousands of times without ever seeing or acknowledging my existence. How do I trust that this is real and genuine rather than temporary gratitude or fascination with novelty of having met actual Conduit who saved your life in dramatic fashion? Given the circumstances, those are completely fair questions, Daemon acknowledged immediately, not trying to argue her out of her uncertainty or dismiss her concerns as unimportant. I do not have perfect answers except to say that I have thought carefully about this for weeks, that I have tried very hard to separate gratitude from genuine romantic affection. But you are absolutely right to be cautious and uncertain, and to question both my feelings and your own. Take whatever time you need to think about this seriously, to determine what you actually feel rather than what you think you should feel or what would be easiest or safest. I will wait as long as necessary, and whatever you ultimately decide, I will respect completely without resentment or pressure. If you decide you want relationship with me, then we figure out how to navigate all the complications together as partners. If you decide my feelings are not reciprocated or that pursuing this would be wrong or unwise, then we remain friends and colleagues and training partners, and I will be genuinely grateful for that. Naya took the time he offered, spending the next 6 weeks thinking carefully and seriously about what she actually felt and wanted, talking with a few other conduits from previous generations who had been located and brought to capital to advise her about navigating her new role and responsibilities. Relationship with a prince was wise or even truly possible given the profound power dynamics and rigid social expectations that structured their society. The other conduits, elderly women who had lived through their own experiences of being revealed and transformed by crisis, that she needed to be absolutely certain her feelings were authentic rather than simply response to being seen and valued and elevated after spending lifetime being invisible and dismissed as unimportant. But they also acknowledged that Prince Daemon seemed genuinely respectful of her autonomy and uncertainty, that he was handling the situation with more maturity and consideration than many powerful marked ones would demonstrate. Circumstances or power dynamics were pushing her toward. They encouraged her to trust her own judgment, while also being rigorously honest with herself about her motivations and feelings. After 6 weeks of careful thought and deliberate observation, after examining her own heart and mind as honestly as she could manage, she told him one evening after their regular training session concluded, speaking with the characteristic directness that he had said he valued about her. "I love you too," she said without preamble or elaborate build-up, watching his expression transform from nervous uncertainty to overwhelming relief and joy. "I love your dedication and your willingness to admit uncertainty and ask questions rather than pretending you always know the right answer. Rather than pressuring me or using your position to push for the answer you wanted. I want to be with you, to explore what relationship between us might become, to navigate all the complications and obstacles together as genuine. But I need you to continue respecting my autonomy and voice as you have been doing. Can you do that? Can you truly love me as equal partner, even though by every traditional measure and social standard we are absolutely not equal in power or status? Relief and joy and love overwhelming any remaining uncertainty or nervousness." "Yes," he said emphatically and without hesitation. "Yes to all of it, to everything you are asking. You are my equal in every way that actually matters, Naya. Your conduit gift is as rare and valuable as my solar lion mark. Your wisdom and perspective are as important as any royal training or political education I received. Your courage and compassion demonstrate more about real worth than any title or position could ever prove. We figure this out together, building partnership based on mutual respect and genuine choice, rather than on hierarchy or obligation. Thank you for being brave enough to say yes, for trusting me and trusting yourself enough to take this risk with me, despite all the complications and uncertainties. I promise I will spend every day proving that your trust is justified, and that we can build something genuine and lasting together." Their relationship became gradually more public over the following year, first as rumor and speculation among temple staff and marked nobility, who noticed how much time the prince spent with the newly recognized Conduit, royal infatuation or gratitude-driven attachment that would fade once novelty wore off. The reaction throughout the kingdom was predictably complicated and intensely mixed, touching on sensitive questions about class and power and divine selection that made many people profoundly uncomfortable, regardless of which side of the debates they fell on. Some people celebrated their connection as a romantic story of prince and conduit whose bond had been forged in dramatic moment of crisis and salvation. Others criticized the relationship as inappropriate and potentially dangerous precedent, questioning whether Daemon was exploiting his position of power over someone who had recently been his social inferior. Conduit abilities to climb socially far beyond what her birth and background should reasonably allow any common person to achieve. Conservative marked nobles worried intensely that allowing Prince to marry former servant, regardless of her conduit status and divine blessing, would undermine the social hierarchies they depended on for their own privileged positions and advantages, potentially opening door to other challenges to the established order. The Sun King and royal family were profoundly uncertain about the situation, recognizing on one hand that the solar lion itself had declared Naya's importance and value in unprecedented divine manifestation witnessed by hundreds of people just months earlier and who carried no traditional noble bloodline or family alliances. But Daemon's absolutely unwavering commitment to Naya, combined with her obvious competence and dedication in her developing conduit role. They worked together extensively training young marked ones throughout the kingdom, Naya using her conduit abilities to help stabilize and guide those who were learning to control newly about the specific challenges of mastering divine power that could easily overwhelm or harm its bearer. They became known and respected throughout the temple and broader. Naya's insights from her years of invisible observation of marked culture, combined with Daemon's insider understanding of royal expectations and complex political dynamics, they advocated together passionately for reforms that opened temple training and opportunities to marked ones from common backgrounds, recognizing that divine talent and selection appeared across all social classes rather than being mysteriously concentrated among nobility and established powerful families. They established comprehensive support systems for marked ones who struggled with the profound psychological and emotional challenges of carrying divine power, and they modeled publicly what genuine equal partnership could look like even across significant power and status differences, demonstrating that relationships between people of vastly different backgrounds could be based on authentic mutual respect and real equality, rather than simply replicating and reinforcing existing hierarchies with romantic overlay. 2 years after the Convergence incident that had revealed Naya's nature and changed both their lives completely, after 2 years of courtship and partnership, and proving to everyone, including themselves, that what they felt was enduring and authentic, rather than temporary infatuation or crisis-driven attachment, choosing to make his proposal during another Convergence ceremony where hundreds of marked ones gathered exactly as they had when Naya first saved his life. He knelt before her in the center of the great hall, in the exact spot where she had pressed her hand to his burning mark 2 years earlier, surrounded by many of the same marked nobles and warriors who had watched in shock as she violated sacred protocols to help him, speaking words that echoed through the vast ceremonial space and were heard clearly by everyone present. "You saved my life 2 years ago in this very spot, standing exactly where I kneel now," he said, his voice carrying clearly despite not being particularly loud, his solar lion mark glowing steadily and strongly on his chest, where Naya's hand had once pressed to stabilize it and prevent his death. But far more important than that single dramatic act of physical salvation, you have saved me from becoming the person I was rapidly heading toward becoming. Someone powerful but profoundly isolated. Someone who used others without truly seeing them as complete human beings deserving respect. Someone who valued marks and status and inherited privilege above character and wisdom and genuine contribution. You have made me genuinely better, Naya. You have shown me through your example what true service means, what authentic devotion to divine purpose looks like in practice. You have taught me to actually see people rather than just categories and labels, to value real contribution over birth circumstances. I want to spend the rest of my life continuing to learn from you, growing alongside you. Will you marry me, Naya? Will you accept this prince who nearly killed himself through arrogance and inexperience, and let me spend whatever years we are granted proving that your choice to save me was worthwhile, that I can become truly worthy of the sacrifice and enormous risk you took for someone you did not even know? The temple fell into absolute silence as hundreds of people held their breath waiting for her response. Marked ones and servants alike understanding they were witnessing something historically significant regardless of what her answer would be. Naya looked down at Daemon kneeling before her, at the prince who had respected her autonomy, and waited patiently through her uncertainty, who had proven through 2 years of consistent behavior and growing partnership that his love was genuine and enduring rather than temporary or exploitative, who had worked to use his privilege and position to open opportunities for others, rather than simply consolidating his own power. She thought about the frightened, invisible girl she had been just 2 years ago, assuming she would always remain invisible and insignificant, never imagining her life could include love and genuine partnership alongside meaningful service and divine purpose. Then she smiled, an expression of pure joy and certainty, and pulled him up from his kneeling position before speaking clearly enough that everyone in the vast hall could hear her response. "Yes," she said, the single word carrying more weight and significance than any elaborate speech could possibly convey. "Yes to you, to us, because you respect and value me as genuine equal partner, rather than treating me as trophy or subordinate to be managed and controlled. Yes, because I love you not for your title or your powerful mark, but for who you actually are beneath all that external status. Someone fundamentally kind and thoughtful, and genuinely willing to grow and change and become better. Yes, always yes, for as long as we are granted together." The temple erupted in enthusiastic applause and celebration, even those who had initially opposed their relationship. The wedding ceremony 3 months later was truly spectacular, and what their unprecedented union represented for the kingdom's future. When Naya entered the ceremonial space wearing elaborate robes designed specifically for conduits and marked with intricate symbols that reflected her unique gift without claiming any traditional totem marks, Daemon waited at the altar wearing formal royal regalia that had been worn by Sun Kings for centuries, his solar lion mark blazing bright and strong on his chest. Everyone present could feel the extraordinary power of their authentic connection, the undeniable sense that their union was blessed not just by political convenience or social advantage, but by divine forces that recognized and honored genuine love and authentic equal partnership. The vows they exchanged spoke movingly of mutual support and shared service, of using their complementary gifts to help others while also prioritizing their relationship and personal happiness. Alone were sufficient without ongoing effort and dedication to maintaining connection. When they sealed their marriage with kiss, and the entire temple seemed to respond with intensified warmth and radiant light. The years that followed their marriage brought both significant challenges and remarkable triumphs, as Naya and Daemon, invisible gift rather than traditional visible mark tied to specific totem. The first 2 children, twin daughters born in their 3rd year of marriage, showed absolutely no signs of any marks initially, causing some conservative nobles to whisper loudly that Conduit bloodline diluted divine selection in problematic ways that could endanger the dynasty. But when the twins turned 6 years old, they both received marks simultaneously in dramatic shared ceremony from the Night Panther, clearly demonstrating that divine selection operated on its own mysterious and unpredictable logic rather than following simple, hereditary patterns as many had assumed. Their 3rd child, a son born 2 years after the twins, received his mark from the winged cheetah at age 5, while their 4th child, Naya recognized from her own childhood memories. The family became living, powerful demonstration that marked and unmarked could coexist beautifully and productively. That divine selection was far more complex and nuanced than simple bloodline inheritance, that worth and capability existed independent of visible marks and could be passed down through families in ways that Naya's work as conduit expanded dramatically far beyond just assisting with annual convergence ceremonies. Developing into comprehensive kingdom-wide program, she personally trained other conduits who were gradually identified throughout the territories, building supportive network and community that had never existed before because she established detailed protocols and procedures for safely helping marked ones in crisis situations, creating reliable systems that prevented tragedies like Daemon's near-death experience from becoming fatal disasters. And she advocated tirelessly and effectively for broader recognition that unmarked individuals possessed genuine value and significant capabilities that divine marks did not automatically confer, directly challenging cultural assumptions that divine selection was the only meaningful measure of worth and contribution. 20 years after the Convergence incident that had revealed her gift and changed both their lives completely and forever, Naya and Daemon stood together in the great hall where everything had begun, now presiding over that year's Convergence ceremony as Crown Prince and Crown Princess, soon to become Sun King and Queen when Daemon's aging father formally abdicated in their favor within the coming months. The ceremony proceeded smoothly and successfully, hundreds of marked ones channeling their power in beautiful synchronized harmony, the kingdom's annual blessing being established and secured without incident or crisis. But at the conclusion, before dismissing the assembled marked ones to their celebrations, Daemon requested permission to address everyone about what the ceremony meant and why it truly mattered, beyond just maintaining divine favor for another year. 20 years ago in this very hall, he began speaking clearly and with obvious emotion. I nearly died because I was arrogant and foolish young prince who thought my newly received solar lion mark made me powerful enough to participate in Convergence ceremony without proper training or adequate preparation. I was collapsing, burning alive from divine power I could not control, overwhelmed and dying, and the marked ones around me could not help, because helping would have disrupted the sacred ceremony, violated ancient protocols that seemed more important than one person's life, even when that person was member of the royal family. Then a common cleaning woman named Naya, completely unmarked and invisible by every measure our society claimed to value, did something that should have been absolutely impossible. She ran forward despite all the rules and protocols, pushed through the formation and touched my out-of-control mark with her bare hand, somehow stabilizing it and saving my life despite having no training or knowledge or any idea that she possessed gift that would allow such intervention. In that single moment, everything changed fundamentally. The temple went completely silent. Every mark in the building dimmed. The solar lion itself manifested to declare that Naya was Conduit, that she had always been marked even though her gift remained invisible until crisis demanded its revelation. And I learned the single most important lesson of my entire life, that worth exists completely independent of visible marks, that the most crucial gifts are often totally hidden until moment of desperate need, that true service means acting immediately when someone requires help regardless of protocols or rules or personal risk. Naya and I built our life together based on that foundational lesson, using our complementary gifts to serve the kingdom while helping each other grow and become better than either could be alone. We have worked to reform systems that excluded unmarked people from opportunities, to recognize that divine selection is profoundly meaningful, but absolutely not the only valid measure of capability or worth, to build more inclusive society. Let us honor all who contribute to the kingdom's strength, marked and unmarked alike, visible and invisible, powerful and humble. Let us remember that the most important gift is willingness to help others when help is needed, regardless of protocols or personal cost. That is what Naya taught me, and it remains the most valuable lesson I have learned. If this story moved you, if you recognize the power of acting without hesitation when someone desperately needs help, if you understand that the most important gifts often remain invisible until crisis demands their manifestation, share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever discovered abilities you did not know you possessed? Have you ever been invisible until a critical moment demanded you step forward? Subscribe to Solaris Legends for more tales of hidden gifts revealed through crisis, of touching marks that should be untouchable, of common people who prove their extraordinary worth through immediate action rather than inherited status. Until next time, may you recognize your own hidden gifts waiting for their moment. May you find those who truly see your value when others overlook you completely. May you have courage to act decisively when action is desperately needed, regardless of protocols or personal risk. This is Solaris Legends, where temples fall silent, where common touch saves princes, where invisible becomes undeniable.